Hello and welcome to the Intellect's Cove. My name is Colin Fairley. I am a pragmatist philosopher and political theorist at Queen's University in Canada. And today I'm going to get to the central thrust of the main argument in my new book, Aging and the Ethics of Longevity Science, published with Oxford University Press and available to download for free as an open access book in August of 2026. So I've said in a few videos, I've already mentioned that this image on the front cover, the iceberg, represents the rate of biological aging. And the book argues that biomedical gerontology has revealed that we can now intentionally target the rate of aging to try to increase the health span and compress the period of disease, frailty, and disability in late life. And in this video, I'm going to get to the central rationale for biomedical gerontology and targeting rate control, in contrast to the dominant paradigm of medical science, which is disease control, which focuses on trying to prevent, diagnose, and treat specific diseases. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to prioritize two items. The first is really about an insight from human psychology about our limited attention span, and that actually figures into how I articulate the ideal of rate control, that we can only process so much information at any one time, especially when the field of information is outside of our main expertise. And so in translating to the broader public why translational gerontology is so significant, you really have to be selective about which parts of the potential benefits of slowing aging one identifies in their central communicative frame to the general public and to policymakers. And then secondly, I'm going to lay out the cards. I'll lay out on the table my cards in terms of the six potential benefits of slowing down aging that I focus on in the book. And the book is really designed around making the case for those benefits and abating many of the common objections or reservations people have, especially to the experimental arm of translational gerontology. All right, so the first thing to note is that, of course, we are bombarded with different types of information. We live in a hyper-connected and hyper-distracted environment. And this creates challenges for all areas of science communication. But in particular, it's a challenge for the field of translational gerontology because we can only process so much information. We hear a lot of things about longevity science from things like YouTube. So before I made any YouTube video, I had spent 20 years researching and publishing on this particular topic in the top peer-reviewed journals in the biology of aging. And it's only after 20 years with a new book coming out with Oxford University Press that I decided to bring these ideas to a forum like YouTube, because the book actually focuses on how to effectively communicate to the broader to a broader audience the societal significance of translational gerontology. And so, I want to actually do that. Building on the book, I want to be able to translate the ideas of the book through my YouTube channel to a broader audience that are interested in this topic. All right, there's a classic article published all the way back in 1956 by George Miller with the title, The Magic Number 7, plus or minus 2. And Miller argues that actually, for the unaided observer, you can only convey a certain bit of information, certain bits or bundles of information before you've lost them. Right? You just can't list 150 bits of information about a task that you want them to undertake, because nobody's going to retain 150. So the brain has, a limited attention span, a limited ability to process information that's outside of our kind of main area of specialty and wheelhouse. And so I actually use that insight to inform the argumentation that I develop in the book. When it comes to the science of healthy aging, it's a very expansive domain. There's a lot of information. And so I I spent a decade thinking about how to effectively communicate the societal significance of translational gerontology, especially the experimental arm of that field of research, to the broader public and to policymakers. And so I'm going to focus on 6, which is 7 minus 1, a kind of magic number. I like the idea of focusing on 6. Casts a wide net in terms of the potential societal benefits of slowing human aging, but it doesn't overwhelm the reader or the audience by going through too many distinct points at any one time and turning them off of listening to the message. So hopefully this video is an opportunity for me to actually put into practice what I argue in the book. Another feature of science in the contemporary domain of the 21st century is that most people learn about science, to the extent that they do, from mediated realities like online and offline media. You hear about scientific discoveries through the evening news, or maybe you see somebody posting about it on social media. But most people don't learn about the science from actual scientists. And scientists themselves face a challenge of translating the societal significance of their area of research to the general public. And, when they are interviewed, they get like a 2-minute soundbite to pitch the significance of their science, and that often can kind of backfire. So communication science shows us that everybody employs frames, which are abstractions that put to the foreground certain types of information and place in the background other types of information, right? So the way a topic is framed will draw our attention to certain elements of a problem, but push to the side other considerations. And so how do we frame population aging and longevity science? That's actually a core concern in the book. So before I get to the details, let me just make this one distinction here, that in the book I identify 2 approaches to longevity science. The one that has got us to a world where life expectancy at birth for the global population exceeds age 73, and that has been through the incredible advances made in public health and medicine. What I describe in the journey through the ocean of longevity as the first stage of the journey. And then the second stage, which I argue is much more critical for today and the future, is the stage of going from improvements in lifespan to improvements in health span. So a quick recap on this distinction. The first one was captured by that image of the steamship of modern public health that I showed in the video on the journey through the ocean of longevity. The first approach to longevity science was to increase the duration of survival time, so life expectancy or lifespan for a population, by medical and public health interventions designed to treat, prevent, and eliminate specific diseases and other causes of mortality like accidents. And this is the ideal of disease control, which is the dominant paradigm in public health. And it was articulated by Charles Winslow in the early 20th century as waging a war against disease, right? That's one approach to longevity science, and that's been the dominant approach to longevity science since the rise of epidemiology in the late 1800s and early 20th century. The second approach, and this is the one that the book amplifies, this is the approach that's much more critical in an aging world, is to increase the duration of healthy life, referred to as health span, for a population by slowing the rate of biological aging, thereby fortifying biological resilience to disease, frailty, and disability across the adult lifespan, but especially in more advanced age cohorts. And this is the ideal of rate control. So in the book, I go through a lot of the detail of the intellectual history. So I'm a little bit of a nerd about the intellectual history of translational gerontology. The first articulation of this ideal of rate control that I found, in surveying the readings on this topic for 20 years, was the editorial by Willard Thompson all the way back in 1953 in the very first issue and the very first sentence published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, which starts off with this sentence: "Everyone hopes to live to a ripe old age in a state of good health." And Thompson went on to argue that this requires targeting aging itself and not simply the diseases of aging. And another excellent historical articulation of rate control comes from Alex Comfort. This is probably the best article that I found on this topic, long forgotten. He wrote it in 1969, and back then he predicted that we had actually developed drugs that would slow aging by 1990. So obviously we dropped the ball in meeting the lofty expectations that Alex Comfort had proposed, but he identified these two different approaches to longevity science, trying to prevent premature death versus trying to extend the duration of healthy aging by targeting the aging process itself. All right, so let me get to the crux of this video. What are the 6 potential societal benefits of slowing aging? The first thing I'll highlight is that I say potential. That is, there's an empirical basis for believing that safe and effective innovations in targeting biological aging could have these effects on society, provided we approach this science in an ethically informed way. And so I keep in mind Miller's magic number 7 minus 1. So I've chosen 6 to give the reader a plurality of considerations to digest, but not so many as to turn them off of listening to the topic. So the first one is improving quality of life throughout the adult lifespan, but especially for people reaching older ages. And this would be achieved by slowing the rate of their biological aging, thereby fortifying biological resilience too, as well as compressing the diseases, frailty, and disability of late life. Right? So that could have just been the book in itself. Just focus on that. That actually translational gerontology, it's not about living to a certain chronological age, but reducing the growing disparity between health span and lifespan, which globally is about a decade of life. So at the current moment, most older persons are managing multimorbidity, frailty, and disability for about 10 years, and it's longer for women that have a wider gap by about 2.4 years globally. So improve the quality of life for people in more advanced ages. That is a morally laudable aspiration, and that would be the distinctive benefit that rate control will offer. And unfortunately, the ideal of disease control has exacerbated this gap between health span and lifespan. A second benefit, and this is where most of the advocacy for translational gerontology has focused on. There's a bunch of economic analyses about how much of an economic benefit slowing down aging, even a modest deceleration of the rate of aging, would reap compared to making advances in reducing the prevalence mortality of specific diseases. So reaping significant economic benefits from healthy longevity, especially when accompanied by a reduction in versus expansion of the health span lifespan gap. So that I just highlight a couple of recent studies that economists have done in trying to provide some valuation to the societal benefits in terms of reducing healthcare expenditure, increasing the duration of healthy working life for most people, compared to the approach that we're already doing, which is to delay death by extending the duration of time people can manage the multimorbidities of advanced age. The third benefit, especially for translational gerontology that results in geroprotective drugs, is that they may enable us to reduce some of the persistent health disparities that arise from variations in unequal environmental exposures, such as poverty and racism, if pharmaceutical interventions in the aging process are pursued responsibly, meaning they are effectively assessed for safety, efficacy, and the potential to be widely diffused. So there's a whole chapter on what I call the intersectionality approach to translational gerontology. And this particular chapter tries to redress the reservations that most people have, that they think that aging drug innovation is going to only benefit the wealthiest people in the world, like billionaires who will somehow be surviving, for an indefinite period of time. I think that's very far from the truth. The truth is that actually those who are exposed to the environmental stressors that accelerate the rate of biological aging are going to receive the biggest benefits from geroprotective drugs. That's not to say that we abandon the project of trying to redress unjust social structures, but we can supplement the social justice imperative to try to redress the inequalities in our social structure by also ensuring that people have an increase in their biological resilience to the adverse health consequences of being exposed to things that accelerate the rate of biological aging. So there's a whole chapter on that, and I will post a series of videos on this topic in the future. Fourth and fifth focus specifically on women, increasing reproductive longevity and improved maternal health. So there's a chapter that will address this in terms of how fertility declines through the third and into the fourth decade of life. And there's some empirical basis based on experimental research in rodents for believing that aging molecules may actually extend slow down ovarian aging, thus increasing reproductive longevity and improving maternal health. Another distinctive benefit to women, but to children, adult children throughout the world, is that if we shrink the health span and lifespan gap, this would reduce the caring responsibilities that typically fall because of patriarchal practices on the daughters of the world. So this is actually a really important benefit of translational gerontology. And this is certainly not an intuitive benefit that we would think about from translational gerontology, but I believe it warrants being up there in the top 6 benefits. And finally, the sixth and final benefit that I emphasize are how healthy aging would be beneficial for planetary health and for other animals. So improving human, animal, and environmental health if research on rate control is pursued in a manner informed by an ethos of planetary health stewardship through translational gerontology. And so I unpack that in the 2 final chapters of the book. All right, so that is a very cursory bird's eye view of the 6 distinctive benefits that I highlight throughout the book. You can expect a series of future videos to be posted going into greater detail on each of them. And if you want to get all the details, I would encourage you to download the book from Oxford University Press. Thank you.